I was polishing an old reel in the garage when Candace walked in like she owned the goddamn courthouse. She didn't look like the woman I married 23 years ago. Not even close. That woman used to bring me iced tea and sit barefoot on the porch while I fixed her car. This one had acrylic nails, a fake tan, and a lawyer, apparently. She held out a crisp envelope like it was a winning lottery ticket. "You're not ready for this, Alan," she grinned. "My new man's lawyer is going to wipe the floor with you." No hello. No explanation. Just that smug smile that told me she'd already picked out the drapes for some condo in Tampa. I didn't say anything. Didn't flinch. Just kept cleaning the reel, like she was talking about the weather. That irritated her. She wanted a reaction. Wanted me to beg, maybe explode. She needed that moment. Something to justify the betrayal she thought she'd earned. All she got was a nod. She left with a flick of her wrist, hips swaying like she was in a courtroom drama. I sat there for a minute, then went inside and opened my laptop. The law firm's name, Keaton and Lasker LLP, was printed in gold foil. I typed it in, and the website loaded with the kind of music you hear in bank commercials. Big names, bigger egos, all Harvard and Yale. Their homepage had pictures of smiling pit bulls in suits. I scrolled until I found him, Marshall Kent, the guy she'd bragged about, her new boyfriend's legal shark, junior partner, aggressive, flashy, and exactly the kind of guy who'd send me a motion to garnish my pension before I even knew we were in court. Then I saw the name just above his on the masthead, Robert H. Lasker, senior partner, founding member, 42 years of litigation, 2 published books, known for his discretion. I clicked off the tab, sat there staring at the screen in the dark for maybe 20 minutes. Fishing line still tangled around my fingers. That's when it clicked, not fear, not panic, just precision. By the way, if you're still reading this and haven't subscribed, do it. 98% of you aren't, and believe me, stuff like this, it keeps our team hungry to keep digging deeper. One click and you're helping the good guys win. Anyway, that night I didn't drink, didn't call anyone, just sat with it. Thought about the quiet way she'd slipped into someone else's life before officially stepping out of ours. How she went from making lasagna to filing petitions behind my back in under 3 weeks. The part that got me, she thought I wouldn't fight back. That I'd go out like some clueless golden retriever she could pat on the head before handing over to the shelter. I slept fine. Woke up at 6:45 like always. Made eggs. Fed the dog. Then I put on a collared shirt and drove 2 towns over. Not to some strip mall divorce place with inspirational quotes on the walls. No, I went right to the lion's den. The original den. The source. Robert H. Lasker's name was etched in brass on a smoked glass door in a granite building with valet parking. And I had one thing in my hand, a copy of her filing, with her attorney's name right there on the signature line. I didn't want revenge. I wanted checkmate. The office smelled like oak and quiet money. Not the flashy kind you see in court TV ads or billboards off I-95. This was the kind of place where pens clicked softly and the carpet muted every regret. I remember the receptionist, early 30s, flawless posture, voice like chamomile, offering me water while she notified Mr. Lasker that Mr. Whitaker is here to see him. I waited maybe 5 minutes, but in that time I watched 3 other people get turned away. No appointment, no meeting, not even a courtesy smile. One guy actually walked in with a check already filled out. Didn't matter. They didn't move unless the old man said so. Then she stood and gestured. "Mr. Lasker will see you now." Robert H. Lasker's office was understated. No diplomas on the wall, no ego on display. Just books and a long leather couch and a view of the bay that said, "I don't need to impress you. I already won." He didn't rise when I entered, just looked up from his papers with the kind of glance you'd give a man either bringing a bomb or diffusing one. "Alan Whitaker," I said, "I'd like to retain your services in a divorce proceeding." He didn't blink, just tapped his pen once. "May I ask who's on the other side?" I handed him the paperwork Candace served me with. He read through it silently. The air was still. Then he paused. "My associate, Mr. Kent, is already retained by your wife." I smiled. "That's why I came to you first." There was a flicker of something behind his eyes. Not surprise. Something colder. A mental note being filed away, like a prosecutor watching a guilty man hand over a confession on monogram stationery. He turned his chair slightly, pulled out a folder, opened to a thick binder with printed codes. Legal ethics. Representation conflicts. He flipped until he found the clause I already knew he would. Rule 1.10, subsection C. If one lawyer in the firm is representing a party, and another attorney in the same firm is approached by the opposing party first with a signed retainer, it's a conflict. One they can't untangle. He didn't explain that to me. I think he saw that I already understood. Instead, he asked one question. Do you intend to proceed strategically or emotionally? Strategically, I answered. I'm not looking to burn her down. I'm looking to cut her loose, with everything that's still mine intact. He nodded. Then he signed the retainer. The sound of the pen scratching across that signature block was the first time I felt anything since Candace dropped the bomb. Not joy, not revenge, just control. Robert closed the folder and slid it into a drawer. Then I'll need full financial documentation, all property deeds, any prenuptial agreements or inheritance statements, anything she may think she's entitled to. I had it all, already sorted, already copied. He raised an eyebrow when I handed it over. You were prepared. She told me I'd get crushed, I said. I figured it was time to stop standing in front of the train and start laying track. He chuckled at that. A small, dry sound. Then stood, shook my hand, and said only this. Mr. Whitaker, you just changed the entire equation. As I walked out, past the same receptionist and the soundless lobby, I realized something. Candace had made her first move with a flourish, assuming I wouldn't know the game. But she never once thought I'd go straight for the king. The restaurant was called Vinigrano, one of those modern Italian spots where the plates are mostly garnish and the wine list requires a decoder ring. Candace sat at a corner table in a linen dress that still had the tag tucked in near the hem, sipping a second glass of red she couldn't pronounce, and laughing loud enough that the waiter paused twice before approaching. Across from her sat her sister, Dana. Same surgically perfect nose, same high-volume voice, same talent for being impressed by all the wrong things. I'm telling you, Candace said, swirling her glass with that smug little twist she'd picked up since meeting the realtor boyfriend-turned-fiancé. Alan's going to get steamrolled. He still thinks this is a fair fight. Poor guy's clinging to his little retirement fund like it means something. Dana giggled. You're brutal. No, Candace grinned. I'm strategic. Marshall said we'll file for dissolution, no mediation. Go aggressive. And once the judge sees Alan's passive income from the trust, game over. She toasted herself. They clinked glasses. She leaned in, voice low and conspiratorial. You should have seen his face when I handed him the envelope. He looked like a man checking into hospice. Dana raised an eyebrow. You sure you're not pushing too fast with the new guy? Candace scoffed. Please. Dylan already has a condo scoped out in Sarasota. 2 bedrooms, marina view. All I have to do is show the judge I was economically disadvantaged in the marriage. Cry a little. Boom. Monthly support until I remarry. Dana sipped. Which you won't. Not for a while, Candace smirked. What she didn't mention, because it would have ruined the rhythm of her little victory speech, was that her lawyer hadn't responded to her last 3 emails. First one was asking for clarification on the next hearing. Second was about the restraining order Dylan suggested, just in case Alan got weird. The third had gone unanswered for 5 days. She'd sent another that morning with the subject line, urgent, need confirmation on filing timeline. Still nothing. She checked her phone under the table, saw no notifications, and told herself they were probably in court. Or maybe swamped with cases. Big firms are always busy, right? Right? The first crack had appeared. Barely a hairline. But it was there. Still, she pushed the doubt down and went back to the show. After dessert, some overpriced deconstructed tiramisu. She pulled up Zillow and passed her phone to Dana. Look at this. That's the one Dylan wants. He says we can furnish it in under a week. Start fresh. New chapter. No more boring backyard cookouts. No more Alan talking about car warranties and fishing reels. Dana scrolled. Wow. Granite counters. Candace nodded proudly, oblivious to the fact that granite doesn't matter when you're standing on legal quicksand. Across town, Alan was back in his garage, same fishing pole across his lap, Same silence in the air. But he wasn't stuck in the past. He was positioning pieces. Meanwhile, Candace was laughing at a table full of lies, sipping wine like it was victory, while the man she hired to lead her legal charge sat in a partner's office reviewing conflict of interest documents and deliberately not hitting reply. Candace had built a fantasy out of assumption. She thought silence meant confidence, that her unchecked emails were a sign her lawyer was busy crushing Alan. But in reality, her plan was already on fire. She just hadn't smelled the smoke yet. At first, Candace just thought he was busy. Lawyers are always busy, right? Especially flashy ones with 3 phones and their own podcast. Monday came and went, no reply. By Wednesday, she was annoyed. She forwarded the same message again, this time with a more assertive tone. Need response by end of day. Filing schedule must stay on track. Per our last conversation. Still nothing. Thursday, she called. Keaton and Lasker. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with Marshall Kent. It's urgent. One moment. She waited on hold. Smooth jazz filled the line. 62 seconds later. I'm sorry, Mr. Kent is currently unavailable. Okay, well, when will he be available? I'm not sure. He's out of office today. The line went quiet a beat too long, and Candace's eye twitched. By Friday, she wasn't annoyed anymore. She was unsettled. Something was off. Marshall had never ghosted her before. In fact, he loved hearing himself talk, especially when she was praising his brilliance. She didn't leave another voicemail. She didn't send another email. She got in her Lexus and drove. The building came into view, gray stone, chrome handles, and that pretentious cascading fountain that made it look like a Bond villain's summer headquarters. She knew the drill. Valet parking. Designer sunglasses. Walking like you're above a tax bracket. Only this time, something shifted. As soon as she entered the lobby, the woman at the front desk gave her a look, not hostile, not even cold, just cautious. Hi, Candace Whitaker to see Marshall Kent. He's my attorney. The receptionist blinked twice. I'm sorry, Ms. Whitaker. Mr. Kent isn't available, but Mr. Lasker can see you. Candace frowned. Robert Lasker? The partner. Yes. He requested to speak with you directly. Now, that was strange. She followed the assistant back through the silent corridor, heels clicking a little too loudly. She noticed the paralegals weren't making eye contact. Then the door opened. Robert Lasker stood behind a massive oak desk, hands folded neatly. He gestured for her to sit. She stayed standing. I need to speak with Marshall, she said, her voice already laced with suspicion. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Lasker said calmly, like a professor breaking bad news to a straight-A student. Why? She asked. What the hell's going on? He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Ms. Whitaker, Mr. Kent is no longer able to represent you. As of this week, I've been retained by your husband, Alan Whitaker. Silence. Long deafening. Candace's mouth hung open for a second before anything came out. What do you mean? There's a conflict of interest, Lasker explained, voice smooth as silk. Due to internal policy and bar ethics, we cannot represent opposing parties. Mr. Whitaker approached me with a signed retainer prior to any formal proceeding involving you. Legally, we're obligated to withdraw from your case. She didn't sit down. She didn't even breathe. You're kidding, she whispered. You're damn kidding me. Lasker leaned back, laced his fingers, and gave the faintest nod of sympathy. I assure you, I am not. Candace suddenly felt like her legs weren't part of her body, like she was hovering 3 inches above the carpet, watching the whole thing from somewhere else. The building felt colder, brighter, sharper. She'd come here expecting answers. What she got was a trapdoor opening beneath her feet. You knew, she said softly. You knew the whole time. We informed Mr. Kent of the conflict immediately, Lasker replied. He was instructed to cease communication pending formal withdrawal. I'm sorry this wasn't explained sooner. She shook her head, slowly. No. This isn't how this works. He was my lawyer. I was first. I hired him. Actually, Lasker said, with perfect calm, you spoke with Mr. Kent. You had an initial consultation, but no signed engagement letter was filed with our office. I'm afraid Mr. Whitaker completed that process in full before you did. And there it was. The foundation of her plan, the elite legal firepower she'd bragged about over wine and tiramisu, wasn't just gone. It had never existed. She stood there, frozen, no witty retort left. Her phone vibrated once in her bag, but she didn't reach for it. Because for the first time since this all began, Candace realized she was standing in the wrong office, on the wrong side, with no one left on her team. Candace hit the elevator button 5 times like that would make it arrive faster. When the doors finally opened, she stepped inside and didn't even wait for the lobby. She pressed the close button and let out a sharp, rattled breath the moment she was alone. Her reflection in the mirrored interior didn't match what she felt. The hair was perfect, the lipstick unbothered, the heels still sharp. But inside, a full-blown implosion. She got into her car and pulled out of the garage too fast, nearly clipping the side mirror on the column. As soon as she reached the street, she started dialing. No preamble, no browsing, just straight to Google. Top divorce attorneys near me. First call. We're fully booked for the next quarter. Mr. Harlan is currently out of state handling a federal arbitration. Second call. I'm afraid we have a prior working relationship with Mr. Lasker's firm. It would be inappropriate. Third call. We do not take high-conflict divorce cases involving representation overlaps with Keaton and Lasker. By the sixth call, the receptionist didn't even wait for her full name. Sorry, if this involves the Whitaker divorce, we're unable to take sides in that matter. She pulled into a Walgreens parking lot and sat there with the AC blasting while she stared at her contacts. All those smug thoughts she'd had over wine were now flipping on her like traitorous witnesses. Dylan's condo? Who was she kidding? She couldn't afford a condo on Vibes and Sephora points. She needed legal muscle. Instead, she was Googling how to get a divorce lawyer last minute, like some broke teenager who missed their SATs. She called Dylan. He answered on speaker with some music playing in the background. Probably another one of his open house events. Hey, babe, she started, trying to keep her voice even. We've got a bit of a situation. Yeah, he said, chewing something. What's up? Lasker's firm dropped me. Alan retained the partner before I finished filing. They won't touch my case now. Pause. Wait, what? That's legal. It's called a conflict of interest, she snapped. They have to step back if there's prior representation. It's a bar rule. Damn. Another pause. Well, can't you just go with someone else? I've called 6 firms, Dylan. 6. No one wants to go up against Lasker. Or they're booked. Or they're scared they'll lose. He didn't respond immediately. Then came the words that made her stomach drop. Couldn't you just, represent yourself? Like, just speak the truth and all that. She blinked. You think I should represent myself? I mean, you're smart. You know the facts. Judges like sincerity, right? Maybe that's better than hiring some last-minute lawyer who doesn't even know the case. She stared out the windshield at an empty shopping cart rolling across the lot, moving faster than her options. I'm not standing in front of a judge alone, Dylan. This isn't Judge Judy. This is real life. He sighed. Well, I don't know what to tell you, babe. I'm swamped this week. Big listings. I can help you rehearse or whatever if you want. She hung up before she said something she couldn't walk back. For a full minute, she sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to regulate her breathing. But it was pointless. The clock was ticking. The court date was in 10 days. And Candace, who thought she'd engineered the perfect clean break with top-tier legal support, was now alone, frantically emailing lawyers who either wouldn't touch her case or couldn't. All because she'd gloated too soon. All because she thought the game started when the courtroom doors opened. She didn't realize it had started the moment Alan knocked on Lasker's door, with a smile and a folder. Alan sat across from Lasker in a room so quiet you could hear the scratch of a pin cap being twisted off. No fanfare. No drama. Just legal pads, a fresh pot of black coffee, and a man who had decided months ago he'd stop playing defense. Lasker adjusted his glasses and glanced at the neat accordion folder Alan had placed on the desk between them. No paper clips, the lawyer noted. Alan shrugged. Didn't want to give her anything to unravel? Lasker opened the first tab. Inside was a certified copy of a revocable trust agreement, executed and dated nearly 9 months prior. This is the joint savings account? Alan nodded. Shifted it under the trust just after her second conference in Miami. I wasn't sure then, but I had a gut feeling. She never brought back receipts. She never smelled like sunblock. You don't go to Miami in June without sunblock. Lasker smiled faintly, flipping pages. Beneficiaries? Me. Then my niece. Candace's name was removed the day after the transfer. No co-signatures. The attorney sat back in his chair, that same quiet composure he had the first time Alan walked through the door, but now it had a different edge. Interest. He reached for the next folder. It was a title document. Mortgage refinance agreement. Deed of trust. Lasker raised an eyebrow. You refinanced the house, in your name only? 2 years ago. She didn't notice. I told her it was a better interest rate. She never read the paperwork. Just signed where I told her. Brilliant. Alan's jaw clenched, not in pride, but in precision. I wasn't trying to trap her. I just wanted options. I saw what was coming. I didn't know it'd come with a real estate agent and an attitude, but I wasn't gonna sit around like some deer waiting to get clipped on the highway. Lasker tapped the document stack, his smile widening as the picture took shape. She believes she's entitled to half of this, he said, almost amused. She believes she's already spent half of it, Alan corrected. But she didn't account for how much of that money was never legally hers. He pulled out another folder. A sequence of dated photos, taken over the last year. The kitchen remodel. New appliances. Landscaping. All paid from a separate account that Candace never accessed. The receipts were itemized. The labor? Paid through the trust. And this, Alan said, pulling one last envelope out. This is the insurance clause. I updated it 6 months ago. The home, the car, even the life policy. Beneficiaries changed. Coverage updated. All documented. All notarized. Lasker let out a small breath. Not a laugh, but the kind of exhale a man makes when he realizes he's no longer playing poker. He's holding a loaded hand at an empty table. She didn't see any of this coming. She thought the lawyer would do the lifting. She forgot I'd been the one paying the bills for 23 years. I know where every dollar sleeps. The attorney tapped his pen on the edge of the folder, eyes scanning the spread of documents like a general reviewing a battle map before war. No revenge, Alan said firmly. I don't want to destroy her. I want to walk out clean, with what I've earned. And I want her to realize, when this is done, that she was never 10 steps ahead. She was always 5 behind. Lasker nodded, then leaned forward. She's still expecting to win. I know. She doesn't know we've already closed the gate behind her. I know that too. They didn't toast. They didn't shake hands. Alan stood, straightened his jacket, and turned to leave. Just before he reached the door, Lasker's voice cut the silence one last time. You understand, once this goes to court, she'll panic. Alan paused. She's already started. Courtroom 3B wasn't dramatic. No grand marble arches. No chandelier swaying above weeping testimony. Just a beige box with fluorescent lighting and the stale scent of paperwork and anxiety. The kind of place where reality hits like a wet towel fast, cold, and humiliating. Alan arrived 15 minutes early. Lasker was already seated, flipping through exhibits with a paralegal who looked like she could dissect a tax return blindfolded. Their table was neat, organized, calm. Alan sat with the quiet stillness of someone who didn't need to look busy to feel in control. Then the doors opened. Candace rushed in, heels clacking across the tile too fast, purse slung awkwardly under one arm, a manila folder bent in half in her grip. Her hair, usually a calculated cascade, was still damp at the ends like she'd run out of time for the blow dryer. No attorney followed her. Just the sound of her own breathing and the realization that the courtroom was already in motion. Alan didn't look up. He didn't have to. The paralegal did, though. She marked the exact second Candace entered and leaned slightly toward Lasker, whispering something that made him nod once, then go back to reviewing the file labeled Whitaker v. Whitaker. The bailiff announced the judge. Everyone rose. Be seated, Judge Melton said, already irritated by the sound of heels echoing after the command. Candace stood near her table like she expected someone to materialize. A chair for her lawyer. A miracle. Something. Instead, all she got was silence. The judge looked over the docket. Mrs. Whitaker, where is your counsel? Candace tried to pull her composure together like a wrinkled scarf. Your Honor, I had counsel. But due to a conflict, they had to withdraw. Have you retained new counsel? The judge asked sharply. No, not yet. I'm still in the process. Then we proceed with current representation, he said, already making notes on his docket sheet. Candace took a hesitant step forward. But, Your Honor, this wasn't my fault. I had representation. This hearing has been scheduled for 6 weeks. The court doesn't pause because you failed to secure proper legal support. Her mouth opened, then closed. The judge was already done with her. She sat down slowly, alone at her table. No files. No organized binders. Just that wrinkled manila folder she brought from her car, stuffed with half-printed emails, an old W-2, and an expired copy of a joint checking statement. Alan didn't move. He didn't smirk. Didn't gloat. He just sat there, hands folded, watching the judge with the same patience he used when fishing a man who knew sometimes you don't reel. You wait. Across the aisle, Candace adjusted her skirt, eyes darting toward the opposing table. And that's when she saw him. Marshall Kent, her former attorney, standing in the back, in his tailored suit, arms crossed. Not in the gallery. Not in her corner. Just watching. Their eyes met. He didn't nod. He didn't wave. He didn't even blink. He just looked at her like a man watching the final seconds of a countdown he no longer had to control. She blinked furiously, looked away, picked up a pen that had no ink and pretended to underline something that wasn't important. The hearing hadn't even started, but Candace already knew there would be no rescue, no clever objection, no white knight with a briefcase full of bailouts. Just her mistakes, and the slow, steady machinery of consequences she never thought she'd have to face. Alone. The storm didn't come in a roar. It arrived in file folders. Lasker stood, adjusted his cuffs with the kind of composure you only earn after 30 years of watching people unravel, and handed the first stack to the bailiff. Motion to include supplemental financial disclosures, Your Honor. We believe there are discrepancies in reported expenditures and a failure to disclose non-joint accounts. The judge flipped open the file, eyebrows lifting slightly. Candace was still trying to figure out if she needed to stand. She did, but halfway through, dropped a paperclip and had to stoop awkwardly to pick it up. The courtroom watched her spiral begin. Objection, she said, straightening. I mean, Your Honor, I don't think. These aren't accurate. Mrs. Whitaker, the judge said without looking up, that's not how objections work. Lasker didn't gloat. He simply slid the next document across the table to his paralegal. Motion to include property audit of the Whitaker residence, including receipts for landscaping renovations, appliance upgrades, and security system installations. All paid for through separate accounts, none of which were joint or accessible to the respondent. The paralegal passed the paperwork forward like a silent sniper reloading. Every document was dated, labeled, tabbed. A war conducted in silence, with precision strikes. Candace shuffled through her manila folder, flipping through email she printed without headers, a grocery list she accidentally stapled to the wrong page, and a check stub from a spa that no longer existed. She tried again. Objection, Your Honor. I mean, those upgrades weren't discussed. I didn't even know about them. That's not grounds for an objection, the judge said flatly. Lasker was already standing again. And this, he said, holding up a photo, is Exhibit C. A classified ad listing Mr. Whitaker's 1972 Pontiac Lemons for private sale, posted while he was out of state on business. Note the seller's contact information and the timestamp aligning with his travel dates. The judge held out his hand. The photo was passed forward. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, were you attempting to sell community property while your husband was not present? It was just a listing. She barked. It didn't even sell. I was just testing the market. Alan didn't move. He didn't need to. The judge pinched the bridge of his nose. Mrs. Whitaker, I'm going to advise you one final time. If you cannot follow courtroom procedure or respond appropriately to these filings, the court will proceed with default determinations based on the evidence presented. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Not because she understood, but because for the first time, she realized the rules weren't bending. Not for her. Not for her excuses. Not even for her crocodile tears that had worked so well over brunch. The next folder hit the desk with the soft finality of a gavel. Lasker, like a maestro, unfurled his final reveal for the morning. Exhibit D. A series of bank statements indicating undisclosed luxury purchases made within the last 6 months. A handbag totaling $4,800. A wire transfer to an unnamed account in the Cayman Islands. Jewelry purchased from an estate auction under a temporary alias. She nearly dropped her pen. That's not what you think. That was Dylan paid for that stuff. It was a loan. A gift. I don't even remember buying half of. Stop, the judge said sharply, hand raised like a blade. I don't want unsubstantiated explanations. I want documentation. She blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears at bay. Nothing came to mind. Not a name. Not a defense. Not a single good reason why she had tried to get a man who had already outplayed her from the moment she opened her mouth. Control, the kind she clung to at the dinner table, at the condo tours, over that second glass of red, was gone, replaced with the dry-mouthed silence of someone who brought a paper fan to a gunfight. And across the aisle, Alan didn't even look her way. He simply turned a page. The courtroom recessed just before noon. The judge needed a break. Frankly, so did everyone else, except maybe Alan, who looked like he could have sat there another 5 hours without shifting in his chair. Candace, on the other hand, bolted the moment the bailiff gave the nod. She didn't even gather her folder, just clutched her phone and purse like they might rescue her from drowning. She slipped out into the hallway, breathing hard, high heels clacking down the corridor in uneven staccato. And then she saw him. Marshall Kent, her former attorney, the one she'd bragged about, the man whose name she used like a weapon over candlelight and wine. He was standing by the vending machine, scrolling through his phone like none of this had anything to do with him. No expression, no tension, just calm, detached indifference. She beelined toward him. You, she hissed. You were supposed to crush him. He didn't flinch, didn't look up right away, just finished whatever text he was typing, slid the phone into his pocket, and finally met her eyes. No, he said. I was never representing you. Bullshit, she snapped. I sat in your office. I gave you everything. We had an agreement. You had a conversation, he corrected. No signed retainer. No formal engagement. I sent you documents. He nodded, slowly. And we didn't act on them. You never signed the engagement letter. You were too busy flaunting it around before doing the paperwork. She took a shaky step closer. This is a betrayal, she spat. He didn't move, just gave a soft, almost pitying sigh. Your husband came to us first, he said, voice barely above a whisper. You should have read the ethics clause. The words hit her like a slap in a silent room. He turned to leave. Wait, she choked. You knew. You knew what he was doing. Marshall paused, just enough to make it clear he was choosing this moment. Not rushing, not evading, just done. That's what strategy is, he said. Timing. And with that, he walked away. No apology, no advice, not even the courtesy of pretending he cared anymore. She stood there, hands shaking, heart pounding against a ribcage that now felt too tight for her chest. For weeks, she had told herself this was just a bump, that the silence was temporary, that she'd recover. But now she saw it. The plan hadn't fallen apart in court. It had never existed. From the first letter she waved in Alan's face to the smug toast at that restaurant table, she was playing a role in a script someone else had already finished writing. Alan never fought back, because he never had to. She walked right into a machine that had been humming silently for months, and pulled the lever herself. There was no twist coming, no final witness, no miraculous loophole, just her, alone, and the echo of one sentence she would replay for the rest of her life. You should have read the ethics clause. The courtroom was silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that doesn't wait for permission. The kind that chokes every word before it's even formed. Candace sat rigid at her empty table, the crumpled manila folder useless in front of her, like a child's umbrella in a hurricane. Alan didn't move. Lasker sat beside him, hands folded neatly, expression unreadable but relaxed. The paralegal was already packing up. They had known this ending before the story began. Judge Melton cleared his throat. This court has reviewed the evidence presented, including financial disclosures, property records, and all relevant filings. He adjusted his glasses, but his eyes didn't move from the paper. It is the ruling of this court that all marital assets not jointly titled shall remain under sole ownership. The court finds no pattern of financial misconduct, coercion, or bad faith on the part of Mr. Whitaker. Further, there is no compelling evidence to suggest any attempt to conceal or misrepresent assets. Candace didn't react at first. It was as if she couldn't. She stared ahead, blinking, not breathing, not fidgeting. Her face looked almost bored from a distance, until you saw her fingers, gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had gone ghost white. The judge kept speaking. Final items. Court fees. Custody not an issue. Hearing concluded. Orders filed. Then the gavel hit. It wasn't loud, but to her, it may as well have been a bong. Alan stood slowly. Not dramatic. Not triumphant. Just final. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket, thanked Lasker with a firm nod, and turned toward the exit. He didn't look at her. Not once. Candace rose instinctively, almost tripping on her own chair, mouth opening like she was about to say something. Apologize, accuse, beg, lash out. No words came. Instead, she just watched as Alan walked past her table, past the ruins of her plan, past the courtroom where she had expected him to crumble. She trembled. A full-body shake that started at her knees and made its way to her jaw. Her mouth was twitching like it didn't know whether to cry or scream. But no one was watching anymore. Even the court clerk was packing up. The final humiliation wasn't the ruling. It was that nobody cared. Nobody paused to console her. No hand on her shoulder. No soft whisper of, "You'll be okay." Because no one had been blindsided today except her. She had stood at the top of her own house of cards, thinking it was a fortress. And Alan, the man she'd mocked for being safe, for being too dull to see it coming, had not only seen it. He'd mapped every wall, every door, every weak spot, and then walked out the front gate while it burned. She sank slowly back into her chair as he disappeared down the hallway. Her lip quivered. Her eyes darted, looking for someone, anyone, who might offer a rope. But there was no rescue. Only the echo of her own downfall, and the sound of Alan's footsteps fading into the hallway. Not fast, not triumphant, just finished.